In the glittering world of Chinese entertainment, where contracts often weigh heavier than emotions and fame is sometimes chained by silent agreements, few stories stand out as much as Shu Kai and Tan Songyun's battle against the forces that sought to separate them. Behind the polished red carpets, dazzling press photos, and the carefully staged interviews, there was a war no one truly knew about until whispers began to surface. This wasn't just about stardom. This was about survival. About two actors who found themselves bound by ink on paper, clauses designed to control their choices, restrict their freedom, and dictate their futures. And when those papers threatened not just their careers, but their connection with each other, the battle began. The story of Shu Kai and Tan Songyun is not just one of glamour, but of grit, secrecy, rebellion, and resilience. And at the heart of it all, a contract that nearly destroyed everything. The first cracks began to show when Shu Kai received a set of documents late one night in his Beijing apartment. His manager had left it on the marble coffee table, as casually as one would place a script. But this was no ordinary script. It was a new binding contract, one that came with staggering financial incentives, yes, but also with restrictions that cut like knives. He skimmed the clauses, his sharp eyes narrowing with every line. No outside collaborations without prior approval. No personal projects. No associations that could damage the brand image. And most glaringly, no close affiliations with co-stars beyond the promotion cycle of dramas. Tan Songyun's name wasn't written in black ink anywhere. Yet, between every line, she was the ghost who lingered. When she later sat across from him at a quiet café tucked in a shadowy corner of Shanghai, Shu Kai slid the papers across the table. She read them carefully, her lips tightening. "They want to erase me," she whispered. "It's not just you," Shu Kai replied, his voice laced with frustration. "They want to erase my freedom. They're trying to own me." Her eyes lifted, a spark of both fear and defiance burning in them. "Then we fight back." The industry had long thrived on power plays. Contracts were notorious tools of control, often written with velvet words but iron cages. For Shu Kai, this wasn't his first encounter with suffocating clauses, but this was the first time it directly threatened someone who mattered deeply to him. Soon after, Tan Songyun received her own revised agreement from her management. It contained a chillingly similar clause about limiting exposure with certain actors to prevent unnecessary public speculation. Shu Kai's face wasn't there in ink, but once again, he was the shadow between the lines. By now, rumors had already started swirling. Fans had noticed the way Shu Kai and Tan Songyun gravitated toward each other off-screen, the unspoken comfort between them during interviews, the almost too natural chemistry that directors loved but managers feared. Their bond was both their strength and their potential undoing. It wasn't long before whispers turned into warnings. A senior executive reportedly summoned Shu Kai into a private boardroom meeting, his tone sharp and dismissive. "You are an actor, not a lover boy. We invest millions into you, and you cannot risk it all for something as fleeting as personal attachments. Sign the contract, stay in line, and your career will soar." Shu Kai clenched his jaw, signing nothing. The breaking point came during the filming of a promotional event for one of their dramas. Both Shu Kai and Tan Songyun were instructed to keep their interactions strictly professional, no lingering glances, no playful banter, no behind-the-scenes photos. But fate had other plans. During the live broadcast, as they were performing a game segment, Tan Songyun slipped slightly on the slick stage floor. Instinctively, Shu Kai reached out and steadied her, his hand gripping hers a fraction too long. The audience erupted in screams, the moment replayed endlessly online, and hashtags shot to the top of trending lists. That simple act of care, that unscripted touch, set alarms ringing in industry offices across Beijing and Shanghai. Phones buzzed. Emails flew. Meetings were called. Within hours, both Shu Kai and Tan Songyun received stern warnings. Shu Kai was even threatened with a suspension clause in his new contract. For Tan Songyun, there were whispers of being blacklisted from premium productions if she continued fueling public suspicion. But instead of retreating, the moment only strengthened their resolve. Behind the scenes, a battle of strategy began. Shu Kai, known for his sharp wit as much as his acting, began consulting quietly with lawyers, something his agency hadn't anticipated. Tan Songyun, on her part, started leaning on her connections in the industry, reaching out to trusted producers who valued her talent beyond contractual politics. They began meeting in secret, not in lavish restaurants or obvious hangouts, but in dimly lit bookstores, rooftop tea shops, and once even in the back of a production van after hours. There, between hushed whispers and hurried plans, they crafted their resistance. "I won't let them turn us into puppets," Shu Kai vowed one night, his voice low but unyielding. "And I won't let them erase what we've built," Tan Songyun replied, her hand brushing against his as though sealing the promise. The weight of their rebellion wasn't just personal, it was professional suicide if exposed. Yet, what they didn't expect was how the tide of public opinion was slowly shifting in their favor. Fans, always more perceptive than the industry gave them credit for, began piecing the puzzle together. Edits of Shu Kai and Tan Songyun's interactions went viral, fans writing passionate defenses of their bond. Hashtags like "Let Them Be Free" and "Contracts Shouldn't Kill Chemistry" began trending. This wasn't just a fandom movement, it was a statement against the suffocating grip of the industry. Executives panicked. The very restrictions they had placed to suppress Shu Kai and Tan Songyun were now fueling public rebellion. The media was split, some siding with the agencies, others painting Shu Kai and Tan Songyun as modern-day rebels against a broken system. And then came the leak. One evening, a blurry image of Shu Kai's contract began circulating online. It showed just enough clauses to reveal the restrictions on his personal and professional life. The industry went into chaos. Who leaked it? No one knew. Some suspected an insider sympathetic to Shu Kai, others whispered it was a fan hack. But what mattered was that the truth was out. Suddenly, Shu Kai and Tan Songyun weren't just actors under fire, they were symbols. Symbols of how suffocating control could strip artists of their humanity. At a press event days later, Shu Kai stood tall before flashing cameras, his voice steady though his hands trembled. "I am grateful for my opportunities, but I will never sign away my right to choose. No actor should." The room went silent. Cameras clicked furiously. Journalists scribbled. And somewhere in the crowd, Tan Songyun's eyes glistened, her silent support shining through. The backlash was fierce. Executives labeled Shu Kai reckless, arrogant, and ungrateful. Tan Songyun, too, was accused of unprofessional influence. Yet, amidst the storm, something powerful happened: solidarity. Other actors began voicing their frustrations. Anonymous insiders revealed similar contracts. The whispers became a roar. Though the road ahead was still uncertain, Shu Kai and Tan Songyun had ignited a fire that couldn't be easily put out. They hadn't just defended their bond, they had opened the door to a wider conversation the industry had long buried. And as they sat together one quiet evening, away from the noise, Shu Kai turned to her with a faint smile. "We almost lost everything. But we didn't," Tan Songyun whispered back. "We found our freedom in the fight. The contract had almost ruined them. Almost. But instead, it revealed their strength, their resilience, and their unbreakable will to stand against the weight of an entire industry. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful story of all." When Shu Kai first unfolded that stack of papers, the silence of his Beijing apartment felt suffocating. The city lights outside flickered against the glass walls, but inside, it was only him, the cold ink, and a future written by someone else's hand. The contract was immaculate, typed neatly, bound with glossy covers, stamped with the seal of his agency. But to Shu Kai, every line read like shackles. Clauses danced across the page in suffocating detail. Exclusivity of image rights. Prohibited associations. Management reserves the right to approve or deny personal commitments outside work. And then came the dagger: no off-screen affiliations with co-stars beyond contractual obligations. It was cleverly phrased, hidden among legal jargon, but Shu Kai knew exactly what it meant. They wanted control not only of his career but of his life. They wanted to silence the chemistry he had with Tan Songyun, bury the whispers of their connection, and erase the possibility of anything beyond a scripted romance. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat by the window, the city humming below him, flipping through the contract over and over again, as though the words might change if he stared hard enough. By morning, He already knew he couldn't face this fight alone. The following evening, Shu Kai met Tan Songyun at their usual hideaway, a café hidden behind an antique bookstore in Shanghai, where the owner kept the lights dim and the curtains drawn. The world outside thought of them only as co-stars, but here, they were simply Shu Kai and Songyun, two souls trying to breathe under the weight of fame. When he slid the contract across the table, she didn't react at first. She read in silence, her fingers trembling only slightly as she turned the pages. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound in the room until she finally exhaled, sharp and heavy. "They're not just controlling your work," she whispered, her voice almost breaking. "They're controlling us." Shu Kai leaned forward, his jaw tight. "They think feelings can be managed with ink and signatures. They think they can reduce us to products." For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she looked up, her eyes filled with both fear and defiance. "If you sign this, they win. If you don't, you lose everything you've built." The words hung between them like smoke. He reached for her hand under the table, holding it tightly. "I'd rather lose everything than lose myself." The industry's grip wasn't just paper, it was people. A week later, Shu Kai was summoned to a meeting with senior executives. The boardroom was suffocating, lined with polished wood and silent assistants taking notes. The executive at the head of the table, a man in a tailored grey suit, didn't waste time. "Shu Kai, you are valuable. But value requires discipline. This contract ensures your longevity. Fans follow the image we create, not the one you desire." Shu Kai's lips pressed into a thin line. "And if I refuse?" The man's eyes hardened. "You risk suspension. Projects cancelled. Endorsements withdrawn. We made you. We can unmake you." The room went silent. Shu Kai's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. Inside, he was furious how easily they spoke of careers and lives like pawns on a chessboard. That night, he returned to his apartment and found Tan Songyun waiting on the balcony, her scarf wrapped tightly against the cold wind. She had received her own revised contract that morning. Almost identical to his. "They're trying to split us before we even begin," she said bitterly, handing him the papers. Shu Kai scanned through them, his anger boiling. "They're afraid of us. Afraid of what happens if we're free." The pressure mounted. In interviews, both were instructed to keep answers sterile and detached. During press tours, managers stood just out of frame, watching like hawks. Even at rap parties, they were pulled to opposite corners of the room, forbidden from lingering too long together. But chemistry wasn't something you could erase with orders. Fans noticed everything, the fleeting glances, the way Shu Kai's shoulders relaxed only when Songyun laughed, the softness in her eyes whenever he spoke. Their agencies saw it too, and every warning became sharper. Shu Kai was told his next endorsement deal would vanish if he didn't cooperate. Songyun was told she'd be replaced in upcoming projects if she didn't comply. The cruelty of it all lay in the unspoken truth. The very bond that made them magnetic on screen was now the threat the industry wanted destroyed. The breaking point came late one night on set. Shooting had run long, exhaustion hung heavy in the air, and Shu Kai found Songyun sitting alone on the steps of the soundstage, her head in her hands. When he approached, she didn't lift her face. Her voice was soft, trembling. "I don't know how much longer I can do this. They're suffocating me." Shu Kai crouched beside her, his chest tightening at the sight of her tears. He wanted to say everything, how much she meant to him, how none of it mattered compared to her, but all that came out was a firm, steady whisper, "Then we fight. Together." She finally looked at him, her eyes glistening under the dim stage lights. And in that moment, though the world was trying to tear them apart, the decision was sealed. They wouldn't give in. The contract was designed to ruin them, to cage them into obedience. But instead, it sparked the very fire that made them unbreakable. Shu Kai and Tan Songyun weren't just battling for their careers anymore. They were battling for their freedom, their dignity, and the truth of who they were beyond the scripts, beyond the flashing lights, beyond the suffocating ink of an industry built on control. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing had become clear: the contract may have been written to destroy them, but it had only made them stronger. Don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Do you think they made the right choice? And of course, Subscribe so you never miss the next jaw-dropping chapter of this saga.